In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to recreate the basic map template and the lighting within it that comes with UE5, and how to set everything up from scratch. So why would you want to do this if UE5 already comes with it? Well, first it teaches you what actors do you need to insert into your map to get a good lighting setup going right away that matches something that Epic did. And as a beginner, most people don't know which actors they need to insert for lighting and what do you need to hook up in order to make them work between each other. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you exactly what you need to insert, how to connect them together so they work together. And I'm also going to add a few things on top that are not included in the basic map template. So let's get started. So to get access and to open a basic map template that comes with UE5, you would go to File, New Level, and here you have a few templates to use, Open World and Basic. So I'm going to go ahead and load up Basic. And then here you have a few things going. You have a ground plane, you have a sky with clouds, volumetric clouds, you have fog, creating the atmospheric perspective, and then you have a few lighting actors. These are directional light, skylight, sky atmosphere, volumetric cloud, and here on the bottom there is a exponential height fog. So they are all connected together in order to create this lighting setup. But I'm going to show you how to start from scratch. So I'm going to go to File, New Level, and I'm going to choose Empty Level. This will come in with nothing in it, completely blank map. And the first thing we need is a ground plane. There are two ways you can insert a ground plane. The first and easiest way is to go up here in the toolbar, use the drop down menu, open it up, go to Shapes, and use a cube. This will insert a static mesh cube, and then you can hit the space bar to cycle between move, rotate, and then scale it along the Z-axis, and then scale it along X and Y. And this would be your ground plane. This is where you would put a character on top in order to spawn and walk around. The other way, in order to include that grid ground template that you see inside the basic map template, you would need to open up engine content. This is a folder that comes standard with every UE5 project, and you just need to enable access to that folder because by default it is hidden. So if you come down here, open up content drawer or press Control spacebar and then go to the far right here on the settings, left click on it, and you can just enable show engine content. This will give you access to an engine content folder right here in the content browser. So let's go ahead and enable it. Here's my engine content folder, select it, and then you can search for floor. And the one that's being used inside the basic map template is this one right here, SM template map floor. This is a static mesh with a grid texture applied, so you just left click and drag right into your map. So you can use one or the other. So let's go ahead and use this from the engine content folder. I'm going to go ahead and select it, this basic cube, and hit delete to remove it. Then I'm going to left click to select it. And let's just zero out the position of this mesh to the world origin so it's right in the center. You don't need to do this, but it's just nice to know where the world origin is inside UE5. So in the details panel for the selected mesh, if you come over to the location, you can just zero this out on X, Y, and Z. And it will just simply place that mesh at the world origin at 000 world space. Let's go ahead and come over here. So next, the other helpful thing to have is a scale reference. Basically, some kind of a human scale reference to help us judge what we build. We can judge proportion, scale, and dimensions of the environment to this scale, to this human reference scale. So in UE5, there are mannequins that you can use to bring them into your map. And this is a skeletal mesh that does more than just represents scale. It actually has a skeleton with animations built into it, but for us, we only want to use it for scale. So to get access to them, you do have to have a third-person blueprint to be part of your project. So when you create a project, you have a screen where you jump through and choose what do you want to use UE5 for. And initially, I chose game, and within the game, there are templates, blueprint templates to use, such as first person, third person, and so on. And I chose third person. That gave me access to a folder where I can get access to this mannequin. And I like to use this mannequin in order to just duplicate it around the map, around the environment, and it helps me to just judge scale and proportions of the environment. So if you don't have the third person template already part of your project, you can actually add that in already into an existing project by opening up the content browser. Let me clear this. And then going up here to add. And if nothing is happening, that's because you need to make sure you have something below all selected, such as a content folder or something else. Basically, if you are under all, for some reason that menu does not pop up. So if you select the content folder and you click add, that menu appears. And then if you go all the way up to add feature or content pack, open that up. Here you can add a template into your existing project. So you would just add third person and it gives you access to the mannequins. So I already have it part of my project. So let me show you. It's going to be inside my content folder. That's where all the content is being kept in for this particular project. And it will be under characters. And I'll have two folders in here. I can use Mannequin UE4, which is the previous version, or you can use the Mannequins, which is the current UE5 version. So if you go into the Mannequin UE4, you would go to Meshes, and here you have a mannequin that you can left click and drag the SK mannequin right into your map. And that would give you one of the reference scales that you can kind of judge. This reference scale is 180 units in height, so about 6 feet. And then everything you build kind of represents the wall dimensions around it. And so it's a fantastic way to judge proportion and scale. The other options for the other two is if you open up the content drawer and then go back up to characters and you use mannequins and then go into meshes. And then you have SKM simple. You have two simple versions right here. One for female, one for male. So if you left click one, you have similar size character to kind of judge proportion to, and as well as this one right here. So you can use any of these three. I'm going to use the original UE4 and I'll delete the other two. Now let's insert the lighting actors. The first actor, the lighting actor we need is a directional light. Directional light is your sunlight. So if you go up to the top toolbar, use this drop down menu next to this plus icon, go to lights and insert a directional light. It should begin to switch over automatically and light your scene. If it does not, you have to go to the viewport right here where it says unlit, left click on it and switch over to lit mode. And this is what you should see. The directional light should begin to affect your scene. Again, your directional light is your sunlight. The position of this does not matter. And the only thing that matters is the angle. So if you switch over to the rotate, hit the space bar. By rotating this, you can angle the sun, the directional light. And just angle it any way you want. And you should see some shadows and light inside your scene. There are few properties we need to take a look at before we insert anything else. The first one is mobility. By default, the directional light will be set to stationary. This is kind of like an in-between between static and dynamic. In order to utilize the new lumen system in UE5, the new lighting, we need to make it movable or dynamic. So go ahead and make it fully dynamic by switching over to movable. This way you don't have to build any lights and everything will happen in real time. And we'll come back through and I'll point out a few other properties as we go. Next, we need another actor that works perfectly with the directional light, and that is the sky atmosphere. The sky atmosphere will add a sky dome around your environment. To insert sky atmosphere, go back up to the drop-down menu, go to visual effects, and insert sky atmosphere. As soon as you do that, you will see a sky dome appear inside your map, inside your environment. This happens because by default, the directional light already has a property enabled to make it connected to the sky atmosphere and work together. Back in UE4, that property had to be enabled every time you insert these two actors. And now in UE5, they work together automatically by default. Let me show you what that looks like. If you select the directional light and then go into the properties, into the detail panel, scroll down until you see the section atmosphere and cloud. Atmosphere sunlight is already enabled for you. If it's disabled, then the two actors are not hooked up and they don't work together. With it enabled, the directional light and sky atmosphere are connected. So if you now take your directional light and begin to adjust and change the angle, it will work perfectly with the sky atmosphere, and sky atmosphere will change according to the angle of the sun as well as the color or whatever else you change. They're now connected. The next actor we need to insert is a skylight. If you take a look at your shadows And if you had more objects in an entire environment, your shadows will be very dark. And in the real world, you would have some light bouncing from the sky to illuminate these shadow areas or indirectly lit areas. So we need to have something to fill those dark shadows with the natural sky being bounced back into it. So for this, we need a skylight. So let's go ahead and insert a skylight. Go back up to the drop-down menu, go to lights, and insert a skylight. Again, as soon as you do that, you will see it change and the shadow will begin to add a bit more blue because they're now sampling the sky dome or the sky atmosphere and being bounced back into the indirect lit areas. And if you had a bigger environment, it would really take effect. And this is how the real world works with light. You always have bounce light being bounced around from the environment and the sky back into your indirect lit areas. So there are a few properties we need to adjust for skylight as well. The first one being mobility. We need to come back up and again, to utilize the new lumen lighting system, we are setting this up to work with it perfectly. So we need dynamic lighting. Mobility for your skylight needs to be changed to movable, fully dynamic. And then we need to change real-time capture and enable it. So what this will do, this property, is we'll constantly sample all your lights and recalculate in real time what the skylight will do. So if you change the directional light and change the angle, the skylight is sampling and being all the bounce rays and the color, and it's recalculating in real time what happens with your indirect lit areas and the lighting within it. And as far as the lighting goes, this is all you need to begin. You have now a full dynamic scene with a directional light, your sunlight, the skybox, and the skylight. These are all working together and will light your environment. However, there are a few things you may want to add in addition to these. One of them being volumetric clouds. So if you want to have clouds in the sky, let's add that in. Go back up to the drop-down box, Visual Effects, and insert volumetric cloud. As soon as you do that, you will have clouds in the sky. Again, this is all working with your directional light, with your skylight, and of course the sky atmosphere to give you real-time volumetric clouds. Now, volumetric clouds have a lot of properties for you to adjust and how they look and how they behave. So you can go through and just play around with the settings and see what they do. And for the next actor is going to be exponential height fog. So by default, the sky atmosphere only creates the top half of the sphere of the sky atmosphere, and it does not create the bottom half. And if you wanted to add something to kind of hide that dark void, you would either have to create geometry such as a landscape or have an environment to kind of hide that bottom portion. But if you insert exponential height fog, this will do two things. First, it will give you a bit of atmospheric perspective and fog density to control inside your map, as well as it will kind of remove this dark void on the bottom and give you some atmosphere below. So to add exponential height fog, go back to the drop-down menu, go back to Visual Effects, and add exponential height fog. And exponential height fog, as well as the volumetric clouds, they now all work together in unison with all your lights, and they all affect each other. So if the color changes, if the intensity changes, they all get updated to show the result. Now, I'm going to check for exponential height fog that it is set to movable, and it is. And again, most of these actors, and by most I mean all, are all set to movable, means they're all dynamic, means they're all change in real time, no static lighting at all. Thus, you'll utilize the new lumen lighting system in UE5. Now, just like volumetric clouds, exponential height fog has a lot of settings for you to adjust. And you can spend an entire day just kind of messing around, tweaking the different values and change the color and see how it all affects your environment. You can change the density, you can change the height fall off, make it denser, make it bigger. In addition to volumetric clouds and exponential height fog properties, you also have sky atmosphere that has a lot of properties within it in order to change everything about the atmosphere itself and how it looks. Again, you can mess around with a lot of these by yourself and see what it does and how much it changes the environment and the atmosphere itself. Now, let's go back to one actor that you should change first, and that's going to be your directional light. because everything kind of relates back to the intensity and the color of your light, of the sun itself, and the rest of the actors kind of follow what your directional light is doing. So I'm going to select the directional light, and a few properties. Again, there's a lot of properties to go through, but the primary ones for your directional light, and the first ones should be changed, are going to be the intensity. So you can make the light more intense or less intense, as well as the color. You can also use temperature. So if you know the temperature scale of lights from 0 to 10,000, you can also use that instead. This will affect your environment in a different way instead of using color. So this should be the first thing you change, as well as the angle and the position. And then you go down the stack and adjust your sky atmosphere, skylight, exponential height fog, and so on. So right here you have the basic setup and the correct setup to begin lighting your environments and all the actors that are working together to contribute and light your scene. Now, before we leave this video, there's one more thing that we need to do, and that is adjust auto exposure, or eye adaptation, that happens in UE5. So as you saw, sometimes when you change the intensity of the light, the entire scene kind of updates and everything gets dark and then everything gets bright again. It also, if you go into the dark areas, your environment, your scene begins to kind of update by itself to kind of compensate for some of the lighting within it. Let me actually leave the real time off. So when you look at the bright sun and then you look at down on the ground, it kind of auto exposes and adapts the lighting to the dark lit areas. And it's going to be more apparent when you are going from interiors or dark lit areas to sunlight to bright exterior areas and vice versa. So this simulates how light reacts when you're working from dark into light and from light into dark areas, how your eyes begin to adjust. However, it gets kind of annoying because you just cannot control exposure to make certain things darker or brighter, because everything begins to auto update. And the best example I can do is just when you select the light, the directional light, and when you change the intensity, see how the entire scene just updates back into what it was before, even though my intensity is now 3 times more. Or if you lower, everything gets darker, and then it just kind of adapts to the scene, and now everything is bright again. And if you had interior areas and you walked into them and out, you would notice it a lot more. So to control that, you need post-process volume, and you can clamp down or disable those values for eye adaptation or for auto exposure. So to do this, let's go back up to the drop-down menu, visual effects, and insert post-process volume. This inserts a box, and post-process volume, just like all the other actors, had a lot of properties for you to adjust. This basically adjusts everything about your scene in terms of color, saturation, exposure, contrast. You can change an entire look of your scene to anything you want with this post-process volume, but we only are focused on eye adaptation or the auto exposure. So I'm going to disable that with this volume. So the first thing I want to do is we need to scroll down to exposure settings, and I'm going to enable minimum and maximum brightness, and I'm going to change both of those to 1. This essentially clamps them down, and there's not going to be a change between the minimum and maximum values when you go from bright to dark or dark to bright environments. And the second thing I want to do is enable unbound, which will make this post-process volume universal. So this means I don't have to be inside this volume for it to take effect. So the only way this works right now is if I enter this volume, and you can see that the scene adjusts, and then when I leave this volume, then it begins to go back to the auto exposure. But I want to affect the entire scene, whether I'm inside this volume or not. So for this, I need to scroll down and find a property called unbound. And I'm going to show you exactly where it's at first, and then of course you can search for it. So it's going to be under, there's way too many properties here for you to scroll down. It's going to be under post-process volume settings, and it's going to be this right here, infinite extent unbound. So if you enable this, now it affects the entire scene, and the intensity of 10 is way too bright. The default lighting intensity for your directional light by default is 10, and it's just way too bright. Good value to start with is 3.14, but I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to change my intensity for this light 3.14, and then from here, let me turn real time back on, and then from here you can adjust the intensity of the light. And whether you are In darker areas, walking outside or inside, from bright to dark and vice versa, your lighting will not change and it will not auto expose and auto eye adapt to those lighting situations. So this is a great way to clamp those values, and actually we essentially disabled eye adaptation. And let me select the post-process volume really quick. And so in order for you not to scroll down and look for those values, you would just look for brightness. And here are the two values. You would just enable them and clamp them down to 1. And you can change them to whatever you want from default values if you need some slight eye adaptation. And then the other one is you just search for unbound and enable it. And one more thing. Let's insert a player start. This way you will always spawn from the player start when you press this play icon in the toolbar. And if you don't have a player start, it will spawn you right from where you are looking at, right from the camera. So if I'm right above an empty world, if I hit play button, it will spawn you right from the camera. But if you have a player start, it will spawn you right from it rather than the camera. So to insert a player start, use the drop down menu, go to basic and insert a player start. And then just drag it right above the ground plane until you see that bad size error go away. And now when you press play, you'll spawn right from the player start. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. You now know what you need to insert into your map, which actors, and how to make them all work together. And you have a much better template to start with, and better yet, you understand what you need and how it all works together.